Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're opening a file that feels like it belongs in, I don't know, a spy novelist's basement. But it's very real, very historical, and honestly, it's a masterclass in bureaucratic anxiety. Imagine this.
Yeah.
You've spent months, maybe years, setting up the perfect, subtle political transition in one of the most volatile places on Earth. You have the money, the propaganda, the people, the whole plan. And then one guy, one of your key guys, decides he knows better. He jumps the gun by 48 hours, and the entire house of cards just starts to wobble.
It is the classic tension, isn't it? The system versus the human element. The system needs order, timing, procedure. But people are messy. They're impatient, unpredictable.
Exactly. So today we're kicking off a new series we're calling the Africa Intelligence Files. And the goal here isn't just to, recount histories as you'd find it in a textbook. We want to look at it through the eyes of the intelligence agencies that were trying to shape it.
Right, to see the machinery behind the curtain. We want to understand the system. How do they identify who to even talk to? How do they define stability in a place they, frankly, barely understood?
And what happens when their neat, typed-up plans just collide with a chaotic reality on the ground? So for our first case study, we have this fascinating document. It's a formerly secret CIA memorandum. The title is just Operations in the Congo.
Super generic.
Right. It's undated in the file, but there's a handwritten note on it. It says, prepared for Nixon, 7/7/1960.
And that date is just... it's crucial. This is the absolute height of the Cold War. Nixon is vice president, running against JFK. The Congo has just become independent from Belgium, and Washington sees it as the new front line in the battle against Soviet influence.
So we're going to decode this memo, and we're not looking for heroes or villains. We're looking at the mechanics of influence. Let's rewind to 1960. What does the CIA see when they look at the Congo right before independence?
They see a vacuum, a total vacuum. The document is incredibly blunt about it. It says, and I'm quoting here, that no one single political figure or tribe was in a position effectively to lead a unified Congolese state.
Wow. That's a heavy assessment. You have this massive country the size of Western Europe. It's newly independent, and the agency is just thinking nobody here is in charge.
Precisely. And geopolitics, like nature, abhors a vacuum. They felt they had to fill it before the Soviets did. The memo talks about how even before independence, they were scrambling to establish contact with what they called responsible political figures.
Responsible. That word is doing a lot of work there.
It's the key word. And in this context, responsible doesn't mean ethical or kind. It means moderate, pro-Western, and, crucially, opposed to separatism. They wanted a coalition that would keep the country unified and tilted towards Washington.
But the Congolese voters had a different idea. They elected Patrice Lumumba.
Right. And Lumumba is basically the antagonist of this entire file. The language they use to describe him is, it's visceral. The memo calls him aggressive. It says he generates extremist political heat.
Extremist heat.
Yeah, and that his dictatorial actions were frightening off the moderates they were trying to cultivate.
It's interesting how extremist heat is the opposite of, moderate stability. So who's the coolant? Who are they betting on to lower the temperature?
They identified a man named Joseph Ileo. He was the president of the Senate. The file calls him a moderate, and notes he was the only figure, really, willing to publicly challenge Lumumba. But he's a politician. Yeah. They also needed a heavyweight.
And that would be Kasavubu.
That's Kasavubu.
Yeah.
He was the president, the head of state, while Lumumba was prime minister. The document describes him as Lumumba's most powerful opponent.
Okay, so you've got your political figures. But that's not enough. You need muscle.
You need muscle. And the document zeroes in on the force public.
That's the military, right?
The military and the police force, all in one. The document calls them the key to the power situation. And this is where things get really tense. The file mentions that right after independence, there's a mutiny.
Oh.
Yeah. The officers were still Belgian. The soldiers were Congolese. The structure just collapsed. Public order completely broke down.
So you have a political vacuum, a prime minister they see as a radical, and an army that's not taking orders. This document, this memo for Nixon, it's not just an update, it's a blueprint for a fix.
It is a covert action plan. It's telling Nixon, here's how we're going to remove Lumumba, restore order, and install our guys. And they use very specific, very clinical language to do it.
Let's talk about that language. The word assets comes up.
Right. An asset in the real world is a house, a stock. In this file, an asset is a person. They talk about developing contact with assets who are in active opposition to Lumumba. These are politicians, military officers, key influencers.
It implies a kind of ownership or at least direction.
It implies utility. An asset is something you use to achieve an objective. But there's another phrase in here that's even more striking.
Decisions on the spot. I circled that too.
It's dynamite. In a bureaucracy, that is a blank check. The document says the Director of Central Intelligence gave the Leopoldville station the capital authority to take decisions on the spot, without consulting Washington, if time was short.
Just think about the risk there. You're talking about overthrowing a government, shifting the course of a nation, and they're telling the local station chief, you don't need to call home. Just do it.
It shows you how desperate they were.
Yeah.
They prioritized speed over oversight. They thought that if they waited for a cable to go back and forth to D.C., they'd lose the country. It made the station chief in Leopoldville for a few weeks one of the most powerful people in U.S. foreign policy.
And it all comes from that binary worldview. Everything in this memo is filtered through that Cold War lens. It's moderate coalition versus Soviet bloc.
It is zero-sum. The document specifically mentions the fear of Soviet-inspired lines being broadcast. They were obsessed with a figure named Kashimura, who was running Leopoldville radio.
It seems almost quaint now, worrying about a single radio station.
But back then, the radio was the internet. It was the only way to speak to the masses. For the agency controlling the narrative, literally whose voice is coming out of the speaker, was just as important as controlling the guns. If Kashimura is broadcasting Soviet talking points, then their moderate coalition doesn't stand a chance.
So the goal is to install this coalition, but they don't want a bloody coup. They want something cleaner.
They wanted it to be legal, or, have the veneer of legality.
Yeah.
They make a distinction between constitutional means and a breakdown of order.
This is the part I found most surprising. They're planning a coup, but they want to use the Congolese parliament to do it.
It's a parliamentary maneuver. The plan was a vote and no confidence. The CIA was coordinating an effort to have the Senate meet, debate for exactly 48 hours, that was the constitutional requirement, and then vote Lumumba out.
It sounds like a corporate takeover.
It essentially was. The memo says that after the vote, the way would be clear for a successor, probably Joseph Ileo, to be named Prime Minister. It would all look legitimate.
But you can't just hope the Senate votes the right way. You have to. You have to ensure the outcome.
You have to prepare the environment. The document talks about supporting this vote with radio, propaganda, and various types of demonstrations.
Various types of demonstrations. That sounds like manufacturing public opinion.
It is. The file cites a specific pre-planned demonstration on the day of the Congress of African States in Leopoldville. They organized protests to create the visual of public outrage against Lumumba to pressure the senators.
That's some serious political engineering. But there's a financial piece here that just blew my mind. The UN is involved.
This is the smoking gun in the file for a lot of historians.
Okay.
We talked about the forced public mutinying because they weren't getting paid.
Right.
Well, Lumumba had no money.
And unpaid soldiers don't follow orders.
Exactly. So the document reveals that a UN official, Andrew Cordier, appealed to the Secretary General to meet the forced public payroll.
How much money are we talking about?
$1 million.
In 1960. That's a huge amount of cash.
A massive amount. And here's the kicker. They didn't give it to Lumumba to distribute. The UN paid the soldiers directly.
That completely undercuts the government.
It castrates the government.
Yeah.
If the UN is paying your salary, you listen to the UN. Or at the very least, you stop listening to the guy who can't pay you.
Yeah.
The memo also notes the UN used its troops to shut down the radio station and block the airports.
So Lumumba is trapped. He can't talk to his people. He can't move his troops. And his army is being paid by the people trying to oust him.
It's a pincer movement. Financial strangulation, political maneuvering.
Okay.
It was all designed to be this neat constitutional coup where Lumumba would just be voted out and fade away.
It sounds foolproof. They had everything aligned. The money, the media, the parliament, the international community. So what went wrong?
The human element. Kasavubu.
The moderate president, the man they were banking on.
The memo says, and this is another quote, unfortunately, and for reasons which are not yet fully clear to us, Kasavubu jumped the gun.
He moved too early.
2 days too early. He went on the radio and just declared Lumumba fired. But he didn't wait for the Senate debate, didn't wait for the constitutional period.
So it wasn't a legal move.
It was completely illegal. Lumumba immediately countered, saying, you can't fire me, I'm the prime minister, the rules weren't followed. The Senate was confused, the public was confused. The whole clean transition became a messy standoff.
The memo calls it a precipitate action. It says he seriously jeopardized the whole plan.
Threw it all into chaos.
Uh,
Instead of Elio stepping in smoothly, you had two governments claiming power. The assets, Elio and another figure, Adula, were left, in the words of the document, attempting to pick up the pieces.
This is the part that resonates so much. You have the CIA, the UN, millions of dollars, the best intelligence minds, and the whole plan collapses because one guy got impatient.
It just highlights the fragility of these operations. We think of the CIA in this era as these all-powerful puppet masters. But the puppets have their own ideas.
Yeah.
Kasavubu had his own agency, his own fear, his own timing. He didn't care about the CIA's 48-hour timeline. He wanted Lumumba gone now.
It forces you to rethink what control even means in foreign policy. Even with assets and decisions on the spot, you can't control human nature.
And that's a lesson that echoes right up to today.
Okay, let's pull on that thread. We aren't reading this just for history trivia. What are the modern parallels?
Well, the vocabulary hasn't really changed. We still talk about coalition building. We still see Western nations trying to find moderates in conflict zones to support against extremists.
And the definition of moderate is still usually just someone who agrees with us.
Precisely. It's a strategic definition, not a moral one. And think about the media part. In 1960, they were terrified of Leopoldville radio. Today, it's information warfare on social media. The technology is different, but the anxiety is the same. If we lose control of the narrative, we lose the country.
And that financial bypass, that really stuck with me. The UN paying the soldiers directly. We see versions of that today, don't we?
Absolutely. Think about aid packages or sanctions relief that are designed to bypass a central government we don't like, funneling resources directly to NGOs or local groups. It's the same mechanic. It's a way of empowering certain actors within a country without, technically invading.
It raises some really uncomfortable questions. The document talks so proudly about using constitutional means. But if a foreign agency is orchestrating the vote, funding the protests, paying the army, is it actually constitutional?
That's the gray zone, right? The agency would argue they were preserving democracy from a totalitarian takeover. Lumumba would argue, and did argue, they were hijacking his country's sovereignty. Where's the line between support and violation?
And what about decisions on the spot? That level of autonomy?
It's the eternal tension. Speed versus oversight. If you need a committee in Washington to approve everything, you'll be too slow. But if you give one operative in the field the power to topple a government because they think it's necessary, you're taking huge geopolitical risks.
It feels like the system was designed to handle everything except the unpredictability of the people in it.
And that is the recurring theme of the African intelligence files.
Yeah.
You can buy the army, script the Senate, jam the radio, but you cannot account for a guy like Kasavubu deciding to just jump the gun.
So to wrap this up, we have a single memo that peels back the curtain on this immense effort. The money, the propaganda, the backroom deals.
And it also shows us the failure. The big takeaway for me isn't just the power of the CIA. It's the limits of that power.
It leaves us with a provocative thought, I think. We often look at history and see these grand conspiracies, these master plans, but maybe this file suggests that the biggest factor isn't the master plan at all. It's the local friction. It's the impatience, the fear, the sheer unpredictability of people on the ground that breaks the files.
You can write the script. You just can't make the actors follow it.
Exactly. That's it for this deep dive into the Congo, 1960. There are plenty more files in the stack, and we're going to keep reading. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.